Welcome, everybody. We back for another special report. You know, I've been talking a lot about what's been going on here in California with anti-black racism, with all these different things going on here in California. People around the country think, since we're in Hollywood, it's all good. No, it ain't. California just came out recently. The city of Los Angeles just came out with a report last week that you guys should go back and take a look at. As far as the racial discrimination that goes on in the city, and you will see 3,000 crimes, anti-black crimes committed against black people. The next group down is around 1,000. The next group down there is around 400. So it's still a major problem. We're 49% of all of the victims of this thing, and we are we're 9% of the population. So with that being said, that's why reparations is such a big topic. And I have here Friday Jones, somebody who's been on the front lines from day one of the California reparations movement. You've seen her here before. And so we have her here for another update because a lot of things have changed. We've gone through another election cycle here locally. And so I want to keep you guys abreast as to what's going on and see what's happening with reparations. With that being said, I want to welcome my guest, Ms. Friday Jones. Thank you for joining me. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I have to get used to these. I got some glasses that like auto change with the light, and I have to get used to it because it does it so automatically. I don't know. It throws me off just a little bit. But I'm so happy to be here, and I sincerely thank you for making sure you get this message out. I saw the post that you did, with the city of LA and the information that came out. And I wear several hats. I'm the president of the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, which is a national reparations organization. I really would encourage other Black organizations that maybe don't do reparations, whether you're environmental, whether you're criminal justice, whether you're education, to actually join the organization and join into our unity coalition, because all of the things that Black people are already fighting for ultimately fall underneath the reparations umbrella, whether it's farming, whether it's, infant and mom mortality, like all of the things that ail us fall under that umbrella. I'm also the vice chair for the Los Angeles Reparations Advisory Commission, and I'm also one of the founding steering members of a coalition for a just and equitable California, which was one of the anchor organizations for the California Reparations Task Force. And so, as you see, I'm in the federal space, I'm in the state space, I'm in the city space. That really is a blueprint for how this should be done. And just because I happen to live in California, obviously the trickle down happens here, but it's a very interesting thing to see kind of from both sides and all sides.
Yeah, it is very so, and you're really saying, because people like to have these arguments. We should go federal. We should go state. And I try to tell people we should go for it all. It's a multi-pronged approach. There is no one or the other, is my opinion. What do you say about that?
I know where that comes from. Dr. Sandy Darity out of Duke University is really a proponent of federal reparations, and I understand that. I mean, if you look at the history of states' rights in the United States and how that has negatively impacted us as a people, whenever you have racists in charge of government, there's going to be a negative impact specifically for us. And with state rights, whether it was the origins of welfare in this country, it was the federal government gave those dollars to the states, and when it came to us, it was like, well, a Black man can't make more on welfare, and this was happening with the farming in the rural community in the South, can't make more money than we would pay for their farm labor. And so when they disseminated the funds, they disseminated less funds to us. We find it when federal funds are, even in a modern context, given for infrastructure and the building of roads, the eminent domain happens where we live. And so state rights have not really been beneficial to us. However, the flip side of the argument is there are states that have their own implications and participation, in the slave trade, in redlining, in segregation, in mishandling of education. And so there's an argument to be made on both sides. Oh my God, I have a client calling. Ugh.
And it's all good. That's what happens. Our reparationists got real jobs, y'all. This isn't something that people are doing. Like when we talk about what's going on with reparations, what happens oftentimes to people out there, they always say, "You black people just need to get a job." Well, we
I have
got
a job.
jobs. Like
Many
no
of the
one
people
is.
that I work with have jobs. So the problem is not whether or not we have jobs. The problem is the inheritances that, our grandparents, great grandparents, and their grandparents were entitled to, whether it was land, whether it was businesses that no longer exist. Those are the things that encompass reparations. So it's not about having a job. It's very interesting. What is the guy who he's high up there in the Republican Party? He looks like a turkey. He's married to the Asian woman. Mitch McConnell.
Oh,
Mitch
that guy.
McConnell.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Mitch McConnell, I mean, his family profited from the slave trade, right? And he's had houses that have transferred multi-generations in his family. And so when you look at a family like his, let's say compared to a Tim Scott, let's name two Republicans that, are in the mainstay. Tim Scott is so proud that he came from sharecroppers, which I am proud to come from sharecropping family, and that he was able to make it to the Senate. But why weren't you able to make it to the presidency, Mr. Tim Scott? When we look at these things, it's like, yes, there's accomplishment, but was your sharecropper, family actually one of the families that was fortunate enough to, navigate white terrorism, navigate property taxes, navigate all the things that resulted into land loss for us, because we lost millions of acres across the country? Was your sharecropping grandfather able to actually leave something, and what was the value of what he left versus what the value of a Mitch McConnell's grandparent left? When we start looking at things in realistic ways that are feasible and people can acknowledge it, then we can have a conversation.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I've heard, it's the whole handing down process. I look at it right now. My grandfather left us some property, but he bought his property as far west as the city of LA would allow him to buy at the time in 1960. And he had money enough to afford property further on other sides of town, but he couldn't. So when you protract that over when he bought that property back in 1960, the inheritance that he left my father versus what the inheritance that he could have left my father, based on what he actually could afford to buy. But because of the color of his skin, he was not allowed to. And then, as people get older, he was less in the. He bought most of that stuff before he had kids, but he wasn't allowed to make those moves once he had kids. And play this. That's way too much to even explain to people. The fact of the matter is, we were denied opportunities for greater money because of the color of his skin. He wasn't allowed to have those higher up jobs. He wasn't allowed. My mom. Now I don't go back to my grandpa. I go to my mom. The color of her skin held her back from getting higher up promotions. She's having secretaries get paid more than her. She's a specialist. And these are all the things. And we're talking about the 80s and the 90s. So, and the 2000s. So
let's look at how that your story, let's look at how that manifests, right? In a continued modern context. So we've got loss of wages, we've got loss of wealth because of home valuation or devaluation tied to blackness. And so if your grandfather had been able to buy on the West Side, if your parents had been able to buy on the West Side, or the inheritance came from the West Side, let's take a Spanish home in Santa Monica or Westchester compared to the value of a Spanish style home in Leimert Park, right? You're talking about $1 to $2 million difference in dollars. You're talking about that kind of wealth, that really happened due to actual policy that we know harmed us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start looking at the repair, one of the headlines that came out today was Ed Blum, and we know Ed Blum from the Fearless Fund, right? He was involved with that case. We know Ed Blum from the Harvard case, and there are things that I have wanted to do on the legal side in terms of starting a fund for the national organization. I was really inspired in my understanding of how the Amistad case actually made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and those were African people who had, were captured, enslaved, brought all the way to the United States. They fought back, they commandeered a ship, and they basically said, we want to go home. We don't want to be here. We have our own sovereignty. We want to go home. And the case went to the Supreme Court, and it was Black folks here in this country, and it was our church institutions that helped, through mutual aid, raise a legal fund. And once they won their case and they were returned back, to where they were from, we opened, I think, 9 HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We opened 9 HBCUs. And when I heard that, I was like, well, we need to do the same thing. And the unfortunate thing is, because there is such disharmony in this reparations space, like, you have sort of a legal dream team wrapped around Evanston, because Evanston has been made a darling. And when you compare what was done in Evanston to what was done in California, California really should be the blueprint, despite the fact that the California Legislative Black Caucus dropped the ball by not bringing 3 prominent bills to the floor. But when you look at an Ed Blum, who is now challenging in New York their reparations effort, why don't he have to come to California? Because California Legislative Black Caucus gave coverage to Gavin Newsom by not bringing forward a Freedmen's Bureau agency in order to house these reparations, to have the genealogy done, to basically appoint the beneficiaries and say, this is the office where you come to get services. The $12 million fund that made it through appropriations on both the Senate and the Assembly side is sitting kind of in limbo because there's no agency for it to go to. And then the land return bill that was co-authored by Senator Bradford with Kavon Ward, who led and spearheaded the Bruce's Beach land return to that family, that bill made it all the way to the governor's desk, only to be vetoed because there was no state agency, and that was his rationale for vetoing it. And so, we as a people find ourselves in a very precarious situation. If you look at, I think it's AB 7, which is Isaac Bryant's newest piece of legislation, giving priority for descendants to go to Cal State schools. I mean, first of all, I think the legislation has 2 paragraphs. It's a nothing burger, and I'm going to call it a nothing burger. It was very interesting for me to see the reparations advocates that were lifting that piece of legislation up. And I'm not saying that it's not something that needs to be done, but how things are done matter. Whether or not things comport to united principles of restitution, compensation, satisfaction, guarantees of non-repetition. Where are those things? Where is that language in his bill? There are no protections in that bill. And so I do think we're coming to a point in this fight where we are really going to have to assert some legal cases, and the legal cases can't be on what we've done in the past. This sort of backlash to the descendants of persons who were enslaved versus, Black people who maybe came to the United States in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and different levels of harm. Well, if you as a classification have been harmed, that classification stands on its own. The descendants, however, have a whole, entirely different claim that really does go back to the formation of this country, and you can't mix apples and oranges. You're either in one classification, you might be in both classifications, when it comes to direct harm, but we as a people have the strongest constitutional right to reparations in this country than anyone else that will stand up to Supreme Court scrutiny. And what we're finding in municipalities at this point, the question is whether or not the municipalities are going to defend, We have to watch what happens in New York when it comes to a challenge from conservatives like Ed Bloom. The truth is, Fearless Fund, when he took them to court, won in the headlines, but ultimately they won on appeal, and you did not see the same amount of news coverage of the fact that they won on their appeal. And I think that that's an important lesson for us to learn, because we have media sources like yours that are actually telling sort of in-depth stories of what's happening, and not just sort of the hot flash pan that you see on mainstream media, where people can kind of understand what's happening. On December 2nd of this year, Gavin Newsom called for an emergency session. I don't know how many people that might be watching got the text, right after the election and right after Donald Trump was declared the winner. Within 24 hours, Gavin Newsom is sending out a nationwide text. So not just California, nationwide text, basically more scare and fear tactics from the Democratic Party, where he's asserting himself as the leader, where he's asserting California to be the moral compass of the United States, and we have to set the example. And yet you didn't pass reparations, but you want to prop up civil rights, you want to prop up immigrant rights, you want to prop up a defense fund against the Trump administration. Meanwhile, I haven't seen any threats from the Trump administration that basically they were going to, cast California out of the United States. Why would they do that? He's a businessman. We have the fourth largest economy at times in the whole world. So California is not, severing itself from the union, nor was there a threat from the incoming administration to actually do that. But on December 2nd, he started out asking for $100 million. I guess whoever told him, look, the state doesn't have that kind of money, we're in a deficit. But he asked through emergency proclamation for $25 million for the Department of Justice to essentially defend cases that might come from this Trump administration. And, there was a very tight-knit group of reparationists there on December 2nd that said, no, we want 10% of that. We thought he was asking for $100 million, so we asked for $10 million. But if you're asking for extra resources for defense of so-called civil rights, then get these reparations bills passed and make your commitment known by actually putting the legal team for the state of California on notice that you, as the governor, are prepared to stand up and fight for your Black California descendant population, which is the 5th largest Black population in the United States. And, I think we're at a different time. I think, our legislators, if you look like at a Jim Clyburn, he's been in office forever. The Black people in South Carolina come for his fish fry, and they think, oh, that's my boy, he's going to do the right thing, and they think he's doing the right thing. And so they leave him alone to do what it is that he does. Those days are over. The days of you being a politician and you not having to be accountable to your Black constituents, that is over. That is what the reparations movement has brought forward. There is not one, bigger than life leader like the Kings and Malcolm X's and the Mega Evers. We everywhere. We just regular everywhere. People. And we're everywhere. And we're just as everywhere as the Asian Pacific Islander community, that they're in community and they're talking to their legislators about what their needs. We're as everywhere as the LGBTQ people that stays on politicians' necks talking about what they need. The difference is they are going to have to start saying yes in ways that a Jim Clyburn won't be allowed to exist. He won't be allowed to exist because there will be people to challenge, and he's been challenged. And others are going to be challenged, and they're not going to be prepared for what's coming, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's the direction that we're trending. And it's good to see all these different reparations movements sprouting out around the country, because as we keep, because one thing about us as a people studying the history the way I've studied it, we've always won when we continue to fight. We just get to a point where we stop fighting. Then that's the only time they've ever taken over, when we get to the point to where we're like, okay, yeah, whatever. But when we say it's going to happen, people have to remember the 1960s civil rights legislation started in the 1920s. It started with A. Philip Randolph. A. Philip Randolph was threatening what's his name Roosevelt for a march on Washington in 1941. You know, and it wasn't like we got everything in 1964. There were a lot of incremental wins during the 20s, 30s, and 40s leading up to that major legislation from us being able to get government positions and contracts. We had a lot of incremental wins leading up to that too. So we have to know this country doesn't give out anything, but if you stick with it, you'll get what you want. I want to know now, I know you don't have much time, where are we right now in the reparations battle, and what marching orders can you give us out here to help you out with and move forward with things?
So, because I'm in three spaces, I'm going to give three very specific marching orders. One, I need people to sign up for the newsletter that we published at the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants. You can do that very easily by going to naasd.org and sign up for our
Say
newsletter.
It again, NAASD. I'm putting it on the screen. NAA?
naasd.org. Sign up for our newsletter, because there you'll see what our current actions are. We have a first 100-day action that's happening, and more of that will be coming out in January once the new administration is seated. You know, we have a fundraiser to help us get to Washington, D.C. on the 100th day. We have the Unity Coalition, which is basically organizations across the country that understand we need to start moving as one. And we are going to be prioritizing actual reparations advocacy. And so we want people to stay informed on what is happening at the federal level. So NAASD is the org to do that. If you're in California, I want you to go to CJEC, and that stands for Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. I want you to go to CJEC-official.org, because they're the official, one of the official AB 3121 organizations that actually were responsible for making sure that Californians in Northern and Southern California know what's going on. And they have done over 100 public hearing sessions. And so at the state level, in order for you to be engaged, that is the organization that you want to be a part of. And recently I joined BLM-LA with Dr. Melina Abdullah. I'm going to encourage people to really kind of check in with BLM Los Angeles, because what is going to be required as these municipalities say that they, you know, are overspending. If any people follow Controller Mejia on social media, you should follow him, because he pulls back all the red tape, and it's as transparent as a city could be in terms of its budget. And he's done a fantastic job. And if you look at kind of the state of where the city is, where the priorities are for the city, what the spending is as we go into the 2028 Olympics, there is going to need to be leadership in the city of Los Angeles around the city reparations effort. And without the people of Los Angeles, I, as a commissioner, am only going to be able to do so much. It's going to require the same action that sort of made its way around the news on August 31st. You know, when we assembled, I think the state challenged us to assemble in Sacramento, and you saw all of the reparations advocates. We were able to pull that together in 48 hours. And so we need people to be clued into these organizations, so that even if you're not in California, because so much work has been advanced and done in California, there are 100 commissions across the country. So in order for people to really stay clued into what's going on, you got to clue into the organizations and the organizers that are really grassroots, on the ground, boots on the ground, doing the work.
That's it. Yeah, we you know, so I want you guys to follow. We have the websites up on the right here. You see the websites right here. I want you to make sure you bookmark those. And CJEC they all have email forms that you can sign up for and be notified as to what's new. Turn your notification on. I know CJEC. They've been emailing me. They don't spam you, but they do give you enough to let you know what's going on. So you want to stay abreast as to what's going on. I appreciate you, Friday, for joining us, and hopefully we can talk again as things move forward.
Yeah, all I'm going to say is everybody keep your eye on the prize. I have been asked multiple times, do I expect reparations in our lifetime? And my answer is absolute yes. We are seeing it. We can't be afraid of it. When these people tell us, oh, we need 10 years, we ain't got 10 years. Ed Blum is on the necks of New York today. We don't have 10 years, and in California, our population is dwindling. We live
Fast.
by all of the environmental hazards across the country. We got all kinds of asthma. We got all kinds of cancers, a cancer alley. We want to be Wakanda forever. And our brother Chadwick Boseman comes from a South Carolina cancer alley where his brother survived the same cancer that killed him. So until we are really prepared to have real conversations about where we are, and not just with Black people, because I ain't never fought so many Black people for reparations in all my life, but we
Isaac
got to be
Bryan.
willing to stand on the same principles when it comes to this new administration. It doesn't matter who's in office. We have the same instructions and work to do, and I'm very grateful for people like you who make sure that they tap in. We met one good time in person, and we've been on ever since, and it's, those kind of things are just invaluable. And so you're a soldier in the movement, and I lift you up and thank you for everything that you do, Dewan.
I appreciate it likewise, and because you on the ground, you putting in that work, so I appreciate you. So thank you again. This is Friday Jones. I appreciate y'all for joining. We'll hit you on the next one.